Reject.
On cold call, it makes one of us.
It's an
Cold call.
unpopular opinion, I'm aware.
It is. What are you sipping on over there, tea?
Yeah, I made some energizing tea so I could be focused for our conversation today.
I feel honored. I feel honored. I'm not much of a coffee drinker. I'll drink it on the weekends, but I think tea is just like the motion of it, even if there's no caffeine or anything. Just having something warm to sip on has been it's been a nice change of pace.
Yeah, especially a rainy day in Nashville. You need a little something to make you feel cozy yet productive. So
Yeah, which it looks like it's going to be for a while. We actually had a little tornado warning, which we're keeping an eye on. But yeah, I literally just saw the tweet.
I didn't hear the sirens, so that
Yeah,
makes me nervous.
they said a difference between a warning, or is a difference between a warning and an alert, and the warning's like okay, so we should be
Okay.
all right for now. But we're
Okay.
keeping an eye on it. How's everything in your world?
It's Friday. It's been a productive Friday so far. Hit a lot of calls this morning, which was good. It's always good to get them out in the morning and get the marbles out of your mouth a little bit. So, how about you?
Yeah, likewise. It's been a productive week, and I like that too. It's actually a good topic for this conversation, is because I think somebody told me early on in my sales career that make your like most intimidating calls first in the day because you warm up super quick instead of backloading them later and you're
Mhm.
anticipating it or overthinking it. So if I know I want to do a pitch or I know I have a lot of calls I want to make, do those first thing in the morning, and you're sharp by like 9:30 or 10, and you're already rocking and rolling.
Absolutely. It's so easy to fall into that trap of like, okay, I've got my coffee. I'm going to just, sift through my inbox in the morning, maybe send out some LinkedIn connections, like those mindless kind of easy things. But I call that eating the frog. You want to eat your frog early in the morning and just knock it out, move on.
Eating the frog. I hadn't heard that before. I'm going to start using that.
There is a story behind it. Let me refresh myself on it and send it over your way later.
Sounds great. We'll look forward to that. Well, I guess in the meantime, we can go ahead and get started.
Yeah.
If we want to start with some introductions so that people kind of know who you are, I'll talk a little bit about myself. But if you want to start and just give everybody a quick intro to you, and I'll do the same, and we'll go from there.
For sure. Yeah. So I am Britton Games. I am pretty new, absolutely, compared to Jarron, who's a vet at Jump Crew, but started at Jump Crew in June on the business development team for strategic accounts. So my main goal every day is to prospect new business, go out and find target clients that would be a great fit for our services, and be that first introduction to Jump Crew.
Awesome. And what's a little bit about you personally? Where are you from? How long have you been in Nashville?
So I am a Yankee, if you couldn't already tell, a Yankee here in the South. I've been here in Nashville for 3 years, from Chicago originally. Kind of had a bit of a different career path that led me to sales. I used to be an educator. Then I was in hospitality and event sales. Of course, with the times that are happening now, lost my job because it's a very demand-based industry, and spent a couple months on the job hunt and found Jump Crew in June, and it's been feels like 6 months ago at this point.
They call that jump crew time. Yeah, it's like dog years, 6 months or 7 months for everyone.
It's so true. It's
Awesome.
so true.
Well, we're happy to have you. You've been an awesome addition to the team. And my name is Jarron Vosburg. I'm the VP of Sales at Jump Crew. I have been here for 3 years. My role has been predominantly focused on identifying partnerships for the organization and helping to put those together, talk about expectations, long-term roadmap, laying out a strategy for sustainable success and scalability. And then I've been fortunate enough to also work on the delivery side, where we're actually standing up the teams to represent our clients and helping those teams to grow. And then I've had my hand in a ton of different pots. Somehow Jump Group let me work on stuff. So hopefully I haven't broken anything just yet. But my career's a little weird. I've majored in film production in Los Angeles. I grew up in a small little town in East Tennessee and wanted to get as far away as possible. So I did that, and I went to LA. Went to film school, worked in the film industry for a little bit on the production side, and then I convinced myself I wanted to be a talent agent because I watched way too much Entourage. And so I moved into that world for a little bit, and then decided to get out of the entertainment business and worked at Ancestry.com in kind of a sales and marketing role. I was there for a little bit, and then when I moved to Nashville, kind of wanted that to be my last big major shift, and similar to you, was lucky enough to find Jump Crew. I think we were about 60 employees at the time. and we're in the mid 300s now. So a lot of growth there. Been really exciting to see that and be a part of it. So, but I thought it'd be interesting for us to dive into one of my favorite topics, mostly because it's something that I'm scared of more than almost anything, which is cold calls. When I started at Jump Crew, I figured I'd kick this off with just a really quick story. When I started at Jump Crew, I was an account executive, focused on going out, just like you, Britt, on going out and finding new business. And that was brand new for me. Like inside sales was a completely new world. I had done sales in some capacity, but more so through like face-to-face relationship building. And I was really intimidated. I certainly felt like every single phone call was like a transaction, and I'd be trying to hit KPIs. And I felt like when I'd get somebody on the phone, I'd start this process of like word vomiting my sales pitch. I had convinced myself that if I can get enough information out fast enough and compelling enough, I'm going to grab their attention. They're going to say, "Oh my gosh, where have you been my whole life? I'm so glad you finally called." And then it was either going to be they're ready for another meeting, or I'd move on to the next one. And I found that, I'd lead with that word vomit of my sales pitch, and inevitably I would hear almost audibly the person on the other side just put up their defenses. Like they would immediately shut down, go into gatekeeper mode, go into defense mode. And then I would have an uphill battle from that point to try to manipulate the conversation, or what felt like trying to manipulate the conversation in a way where I could get and keep their attention. And that was really stressful for me for a little while, getting over that hurdle of being like, I have to convince this person to listen to me. I had a great team at the time, many of whom I still work with. And one of them actually came up to me one day and kind of collectively said to our team, because we had really open floor plan and they were able to just kind of pop over and say, "Hey, I had a thought." And he said, "Hey, I just tried something out and I wanted to share it with you guys and see if it works, because it works for me." And so basically what he tried was, instead of leading with his sales pitch, he actually challenged himself to see how long he could go without actually saying who he was and why he was calling. And this seems like a little libertarian perspective on this, actually, because you usually try to state that stuff right out of the gate. But what he said was that instead of leading with my sales pitch, I led with asking a very open-ended, casual question. And something like that would be like, he'd call and he'd say, "Hey, I have kind of a weird question." That's how he always teed it up, is, "Hey, I've got kind of a weird question for you," whoever it was who answered the phone. "Do you know by any chance who it was that made this LinkedIn post on your page about X, Y, or Z?" And then just pause and then just like let the silence sit there. And almost 100% of the time, the person would say something like, "Oh, well, that was actually Britt on our marketing team," or, "Oh, I'm not sure who it was, but I'm glad you found it." So that person in that moment was reeled in, just because this is a person calling, and more times than not, everyone's happy to like accommodate just somebody's question, right? And then if they had follow-up questions, obviously share a little bit more information. But the key takeaway that I had from what he was doing there was that he was leading with curiosity. He was leading with this discovery mindset. He was playing this role of somebody who's like, "Hey, I stumbled on this. I was doing some digging, like I was looking around." And we started to apply that same methodology to our outbound phone calls, and started to see that over time, we started to get much better interactions. People would start to engage with us, ask follow-up questions. And then when they're the ones asking the follow-up questions, now you're engaged in a conversation, and it's not a one-sided pitch. So that fundamentally changed the way that I worked. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit more. But with that in mind, Britt, I'd love to hear just a little bit, about how that speaks to you and what you're doing day to day, here at Jump Crew, and anything else that may have sparked as you think about the way you've been making your phone calls.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a lot of really good points, and let's backtrack. Thank you for the rundown on your previous career paths, because I didn't know that about you. So
really?
Let's chat LA Film School a little bit later. But yeah, I mean, I think a couple of takeaways from what you just shared with me. One is, oftentimes with salespeople, we're not comfortable with silence, right? It's scary. I mean, it's scary to call up a stranger. It's scary to sit there and wait for feedback, wondering what their thought process is. So I think something that your colleague really was, a tactic they were really utilizing was being comfortable with silence, which is okay. Secondarily, I think, what in the world is someone's favorite topic, right? Themselves. people love to talk about themselves. So I think that leading with curiosity, leading with open-ended questions, and really allowing a prospect the opportunity to talk about their favorite topic. I mean, what better way to spark a quick emotional relationship with a prospect before really getting into anything salesy, right? People are going to buy from people that they trust. So the quicker you can build that emotional rapport with a prospect, the better. So yeah, I love what you said there about leading with curiosity. Open-ended questions are going to get you much further, and your conversation is going to last much longer than if you give the prospect an opportunity to say yes or no.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's perfectly said. And like from a preparation standpoint, something that we started to do, and I'll be curious to hear how this works for you as well, is you don't need a ton of time to do this, but in the 30 seconds before you make a phone call, pulling up that prospect's LinkedIn page, and you can oftentimes find a gold mine of stuff to reference. And also, if you search your prospect's name in the company where they currently work into Google, you can usually find some reference of them, either speaking at a conference or a blog post that they wrote or a LinkedIn post. And when you can lead with that, like, hey, I saw you speak at so-and-so conference, or hey, I saw you attended JumpCon, hope you had a good time. Like when you can hit that right out of the gate, they immediately recognize the fact that you took just a moment and you weren't just blindly going into that phone call, just prepared to do your sales pitch and that's it. And we've had a lot of success. We shared a blog post about the success we've had doing that by email. We lead our emails with that personalization. I actually just connected with somebody who in college had won 4 straight NCAA championships in track and field. And so when I connected with that person, I said, hey, 4 straight NCAA championships, save some for the rest of us. And I got a response within like 30 minutes. And when you can take that same approach over the phone, they recognize that you're a human being. And that recognition is something that we as salespeople oftentimes forget, is that they're a human being too. Like, they're having a good or a bad day. They've got tasks they got to do when they get home. They've got a Netflix show they're binging right now. Like whatever it may be, like it makes that engagement more fun. And I think that's something that we found too, was in that process of shifting our mindset from selling to discovering, that those calls became a lot more fun. Like, have you done anything in your experience so far at Jump Crew that's changed the feel of those phone calls? Or are you finding that as you get more reps in, it's starting to feel more comfortable because you can be more your own personality? Like, just kind of curious how you feel your personality is coming into those phone calls as you try out new strategies.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, just in the 2 months I've been here so far, I have tried out several different strategies in terms of either my introduction on these calls, and or just where do we go after we have those initial introductions? How can I get this back on track to the path I'd like to take it to next step? So yeah, I think initially my strategy was, calling into very specific verticals and doing a lot of prep work on who I'm calling into, the title, so to speak, whether I'm calling into the CRO or the CFO or that, what the mindset of those specific titles was really important to me, to really know who I'm speaking to and target my phrasing accordingly. Now I've kind of switched it up a little bit. I think that 2 months ago I wasn't leading with curiosity and I wasn't leading with questions. So oftentimes it's our director of sales, Abby, says this a lot along the lines of like, paralyzation by over preparation, right? You want to do a little bit of digging, spend that 30 seconds right before, find something that you can relate to, and do your best to show your personality through it. Sometimes though, you have to be okay with them not biting, with them saying, I don't have the time for this, or, you're too bubbly this early in the morning, or something along those lines. You have to be okay with following the organic nature of the conversation. But I would say prep work is key. It really is.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Finding that balance between too much or too little preparation is key. And then also something that helps you to wade through any uncertainty of how much you have or haven't prepared is the ability to be self-deprecating. Like, I think that we can oftentimes feel like that pitch, quote unquote, has to be just perfect. You have to hit every note. It has to be well rehearsed. You have to be smooth talking. But in all actuality, I think that some of the best conversations I've had are the ones where, whether I did it on purpose, which I have, or I've done it accidentally, kind of fumbled through certain parts of what I was saying, oftentimes just helps them remember that you're a human being. And something that I've seen work really, really well is acknowledging right out of the gate on the phone, hey, Britt, this is 100% a cold intro. You and I haven't had a chance to connect before, so I'm just going to call it what it is. I stumbled on your company. I was doing a lot of digging, and I loved X, Y, or Z. Quick intro to me. I do this, that, or the other. I work with Jump Crew. I thought, kind of digging in the dark here, maybe there's a good fit here, and I caught you on the phone, so maybe it's worth chatting about now, or it's something we can have a conversation about later if it makes sense. And then that's it. Like that's all you need in that very first sentence, is making it as casual as possible. And then if they do push back at all and you realize the conversation's not going anywhere, a really great place to bookend it is with any of that personalization research that you've done to be like, hey, no worries. Hey, by the way, I saw that you were in a fraternity or sorority. We actually had that at my campus as well. Not sure if you guys did so-and-so, event or not. You can make up whatever it may be, but it gives you that ammunition that makes you feel like you're ready to go. My dad always stressed this thing with me. He calls it the 6 Ps, and it's proper prior planning prevents poor performance. And it's something that for me, as somebody who always feels like I'm going to fumble through it, if I do just a little bit, so I know I've got some ammunition when I go into the phone call, I've at least got a safety net in the event that I stumble and feel like I totally hit a wall.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that brings up a couple of ideas on my end in terms of kind of specific changes I've made in strategy and cold calling strategy. Initially, I think I started off, basically following up on an email I've sent your way, give the subject line of the email, wanted to follow up on that. But I was feeling like I wasn't grabbing them right then and there. Like there was something lacking in that initial, 20 seconds where they're just like, oh, of course I have to sift through my inbox and find what you're talking about, or it wouldn't ring a bell even though I know that they received it. So I switched it up and I started with something that I actually stole from kind of a guru in the business development world, Morgan Ingram. He chatted with us, and he gave a really good kind of 20-second intro, something like, hey, Jarron, thanks for taking the call. I know I'm calling you out of the blue here. Do you have a few moments to chat? So really kind of just adding in a fake but intentional, organic laugh, if you would, to really kind of break the ice. Thank them for taking the time to answer your call, acknowledging that they can be busy and thanks for taking the time. And then asking them if they have a few moments to chat. So this is kind of, I feel like this is a polarizing topic because I feel like some salespeople think, we want to be respectful of time. But on the other hand, do we really want to set them up for the classic, did I catch you at a bad time? Did I catch you at a bad time? It's like, no, you really didn't by end of conversation.
Exactly.
So kind of keeping it vague and high level, right? Not, as you said earlier, not saying, hey, this is Jarron from Jump Crew. It's, hey, I understand I'm calling you out of the blue here. Wondering if you have a moment to chat. And then usually they're kind of like, maybe, who is this?
Yep.
So to your point, that's a little bit of a switch in my talk track that I've seen some success with as of late.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think I've been using a Frankenstein version of that for a little bit, where I try to simultaneously acknowledge that this is a cold intro, give them enough information to understand that this is legit, and then last is to acknowledge that I know your time is valuable. Like one of the things that I've liked the least, and there's different schools of thought on this, but I don't know if you've ever heard the talk track where someone calls and they're like, hey, Britt, this is Jarron from Jump Crew. If you've got 30 seconds, I can tell you why it is I'm calling and see if it makes sense. It's like, although I understand what's trying to be accomplished there, it still is so like blatantly, I'm about to give you a sales pitch.
Yeah.
Whereas the balance that seems to be working is that, hey, I know I'm calling you out of the blue, like you said, I found your website or I found you speaking, really piqued my interest. I love this, that, or the other. I spearhead partnerships at a company called Jump Crew, where we stand up sales teams on behalf of growing businesses. I don't know if it makes sense for us to have a conversation about that or not. And I know how valuable your time is. So we can chat about it now, or I'm happy to follow up another time when you have a few minutes to spare. And then like that seems to be a pretty good combination of all of those elements, also keeping the tone casual and also making sure that they have the opportunity to just acknowledge it and dictate what the next step is without feeling like they're reeling on their heels.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that brings up a good point too about like scripting. You want to touch on scripting? Like I don't know how you feel, but part of my preparation is to really outline what I want to get out of this conversation, so I know where I'm going with it. And if I do get off topic or if an objection does arise, I can always kind of steer back. But there's that classic, conception of salespeople. No one wants to be sold to, especially in the middle of the day, right? Answering their phone. So what are your thoughts on scripting? How much of that work do you do? And what would you advise?
Yeah, I like outlining as opposed to scripting. I think that scripting can get dangerous to feel that the words in that particular order are going to be the silver bullet to getting somebody to respond. And it's impossible to codify that. Like human beings are naturally in the gray area of everything. Like we don't communicate through we do through binary, through email, but it's people writing the actual words, right? So there's gray area in there. And it's the humanization that I feel is what's the difference between somebody shutting down because they immediately recognize that this is a pre-rehearsed sales pitch versus this is somebody who's actually doing some discovery. And when you're doing discovery, you don't know what the outcome is. By definition, the word discovery means you don't know where you're going and you don't necessarily have a game plan. But you're searching, you're hunting, you're poking, you're testing, you're learning. And so I think if we take that same mindset and create an outline, similar to what we talked about, outline section 1 would be acknowledging that this is a cold intro. Outline section B would be, here was what I saw specifically that piqued my interest. Outline section C would be, here's why I think that this conversation would even make sense, like try to connect the dots. And then outline section D would be, I understand your time is valuable and now might not be the best time for us to have this conversation. And then let the reps themselves take ownership over predominantly section B, which is that here's what I saw, and let them articulate that in their own personality. And that's another point too. It's like everyone on our team, as with any team, has completely different personalities, and the way one person sells versus the way somebody else sells is going to be completely different. So if you use a framework or a game plan, kind of like sports, here's the play, but then what happens throughout the course of the play is going to be up to the athletes to execute on. So I think that you can find a balance there instead of scripting, think of it as more so outlining. Does that make sense? I feel like that's something that you've been doing really well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, part of that prep work and part of that outlining is like, no matter who you're talking to, you want to identify the why. Like the why speak statement. Why am I calling you today? The reason I'm calling is, and whether that's, I noticed on your website XYZ, or you have a product launch coming up that, sparked my interest, whatever the case may be, leading the conversation with a why you are reaching out is, you have to have that resource in your back pocket because you will be asked that. Yeah. And along those lines, Jarron, you want to touch on objections, because I feel like curiosity-based cold calling, when it comes to objections, if you're truly curious, when you're given an objection, you naturally want to stay engaged, to learn a bit more and find an opportunity, right? So whereas 99% of salespeople are probably like, oh, no, you don't, you're not interested. Okay, bye.
Yeah.
Curiosity-based salespeople will be like, tell me more. What do you mean? You're not interested in what specifically? Or, putting on a bit of a challenger hat and really diving into those objections will offer you so much more information about the prospect than if you were to just bow out and move on.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think that speaks to what you said about, not being able to just straight up templatize every single sales pitch, because sales pitch, like that scripted sales pitch, may not speak as well to role type, to why you're reaching out, to time of day, to all of the other variables. But as long as you have that framework of that why as the North Star to the entire conversation, you can always reset to that, right? You can always come back to the mean and have somewhere to reset the conversation. And then finding those talking points, I think, is one of the most valuable things that we as salespeople can do. There is so much information out there of like how to even source information about like how to find leads based on curiosity. And so like I've seen a couple of sources that I'm happy to share, and I'd love to hear some of yours as well. Mm-hmm. Like I think above and beyond, LinkedIn, obviously where we are right now, is a phenomenal resource. In the event that most people are keeping that up to date, usually you can find information about their work history. You may see some common connections. You may see some clubs or organizations that they're affiliated with, their education. Most people, I'll tell you, education is a fascinating one, because I'll tell you, one of the silver bullets has been that if you have any affiliation with the same school, the same university, like that's almost a 100% hit rate. I actually have hunted specifically just based off of people that went to Loyola Marymount University. There's a shout out. I'm gonna have to send them an invoice, but yeah. So, and that's been great, because most people be like, "Hey, I'll always take a call from somebody from LMU, or I'll always take a call from somebody from so and so fraternity." So so that's a really good resource.
Thing. I basically I use LinkedIn to sort through all the alumni from Miami University, and I'll send them a LinkedIn connection and add a personalized note and say something like, of course, like, would love to connect, that sort of thing. But P.S., I noticed we're fellow Red Hawks, like love and honor, and 9.5 times out of 10, they're like, hey, what's up? So great icebreaker there. Good call out.
And geography is another big one too. I mean, here in Nashville, like people being local to Nashville goes so far. Just acknowledging, hey, I saw you're local here in Nashville. I am too. You can talk about whatever, mention, too bad the Preds are out of the playoffs or whatever. Like, and they'll immediately respond, if for nothing else. And I've had people acknowledge it. They're like, hey, this isn't a good fit for us, but always happy to connect with people who are local in Nashville. So you can use geography, you can use education, you can use organizations or mutual connections that you actually do know. Sometimes, admittedly, I'll find I'm connected to somebody, and usually I'm like, I actually don't know who that person is, so I can't really use that. That's one. Another source that I really like is just typing the prospect's name and the company into Google. You can usually find some interesting stuff, either a press release about when they moved into their most recent role, sometime when they were speaking publicly. It's a gold mine is if they ever were on a webinar or they spoke at a conference. Mm-hmm. I saw you speak at so-and-so conference. Boom, it's game over. You have their undivided attention.
About XYZ. Pull up a little snippet of their video recording. Absolutely. Jarron, it looks like we have a question that came in. I've heard you need 3 no's or objections on a cold call before you accept and sign off. Is that something you do? If so, any tips? What do you think?
That's a great question. I am terrified of rejection. I run from that fear every single day. So I don't know if I have a hard and fast rule about no's. I'm certainly not counting the no's. Like, it's more about just reading the room, like temperature check. It's like you do in a conversation. You go to a party and you're chatting with someone and you kind of feel like, all right, seems to be stalling out. Well, hey, I'm going to go grab another drink and I'll see you around. Awesome. Okay. And then move away. Yeah. You just got to kind of feel the room. I think that the more that you try to put yourself into some predefined set of rules, mm-hmm. the sooner that you're going to overthink the entire process and ultimately reveal the fact that you're really just there to try to get something out of them, right? So if you can treat it just as a conversation, like, hey, this feels like this is naturally coming to a close, and that just takes reps, and reps are the scariest part of it, but just read the room. I don't know if you feel differently.
No, I absolutely agree. The more you call, the more you target trends in those conversations, especially if you're calling into the same verticals or the same, title specific type. So you're exactly right. I wouldn't put a specific number on how many times I'm rejected before I throw in the towel, but you definitely want to like I said, put on your challenger hat and go to bat, at least with the first objection.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a delicate balance too between, like, look, if you fundamentally believe that this company and this prospect are just such a good fit for the business, you may handle that a little bit differently than if, hey, this was a little bit of a long shot, like, and I know that there's a mathematics element to sales, and I may try to spend an additional 60 seconds here challenging those objections and saying, and they say, this isn't something we'd be interested. Well, is that because you already, like, they may have already made up their mind. You just have to kind of play that balance. But if you really do believe it, then you can think of some ways creatively to try to soften a conversation outside of that phone call. Just because they said this isn't something we'd be interested in doesn't mean that they've already assessed the entirety of what you have to offer. It may just mean that their kids who are in school are yelling in the other room and they just have a short fuse at the moment and you caught them at a bad time. And so you just have to kind of read that room a little bit and make sure that you're just sensing the tonality of the person that you're speaking to. And, you can always provide more value via email, mostly because of the fact that's something that people can review in their own time and they don't feel like they're put up against a wall over the phone. And with everybody working from home right now, phone conversations are probably going to be a little bit different just because you're not catching them necessarily like sitting at their desk. So I'd say reading the room is probably the end all be all to just acknowledging whether or not you want to shut the conversation down. We have another question that says, how do you stick the landing on a cold call? It's a scene that everything's going well. You want to set that discovery call. What are some tactical closers that we can use to confirm those next steps? Great question. I mean, that's always the hardest part is like, how do I know that I'm actually moving this from on the phone to a tangible next step? Do you want to start with that? And I'm happy to add.
Yeah, I love this. I think something that I do specifically, and I recently started exercising this, and I've seen valuable return in terms of meetings booked, is really, outline next steps. Hey, I would love to take this, conversation a little bit further. I actually asked them to pull up their calendar while we're on the phone. And hey, what does next Tuesday look like for you? Anything in the morning? Mornings are typically better for me. Again, make it conversational, make yourself feel humanized, but also make sure that they put something on the calendar before you hang up. That is huge because, like you said, we can take this to email, and oftentimes I was taking it to email and following up with more collateral or maybe just a recap of the call that we had, and then I would say something like, if I've sparked interest, would love to set up another call. Chances are you're gonna lose at least half of those.
Yeah.
So really good, actionable step is to have them pull up their calendar, pinpoint a time to meet, and say, hey, I'm sending this invite over right now so we can get it, in both of our books, and excited to take it from there.
I love that. And then one thing that we've been playing around with that seems to be working well is not only scheduling the call, but also setting expectations for what's going to happen on that call. And the purpose there is to try to decrease no-show rates, because then you build value of what's actually going to happen. Awesome. I'm excited for this. Hey, just so you know, here's what we typically cover on those calls. Like, I'd love to dig in a little bit deeper into where I saw fit. That much is clear. I'd love to share some of our background and how our model works and talk you through a couple of use cases that helped me connect the dots when I was envisioning why this would be good for insert company name here. And I'm actually going to invite a colleague of mine who's going to help to flesh out some of these thoughts as well. They have a lot of experience on the strategic side and putting these partnerships together. Now that you know what we're going to cover, is there anyone else on your side that you think you'd want to include in that call. Otherwise, we'll be pumped just to have the opportunity to talk without me bugging you here right in the middle of the day when I'm sure you got a million things to do. And then that builds like context for that conversation, and it weights it a lot more heavily in their mind than just, oh, somebody happened to catch me and I just so happened to agree to a call and I got the invite, but maybe I will or I won't show up. So building value for that call as well has been really meaningful.
A little bit more buy-in for sure. And I like what you said about, is there anyone else we might want to bring into the call on your side? Because let's be honest, the more champions that we can get for our cause, you may not ultimately be speaking to the end-all be-all decision maker. So the more buy-in we can get from more people on their end, amazing.
Definitely. And also, if you have the opportunity to try to accelerate the sales cycle from the point of them just listening to you in that first call, but to actually have someone who would make a decision on that call so nothing gets lost in translation. I think that that's one of the biggest challenges that I've seen is, you may have that champion who then says, okay, I'm going to go and talk to my team about this, but you're not going to be there to be able to fill in the gaps about information that you are the only person uniquely positioned to answer. And they may position it in a completely different way, and the narrative. So getting those people involved earlier rather than later is always a huge benefit. Another question that we got is, are you measuring SDR and BDR on activity or results? I can take that one for sure. It sounds like a cop-out, but it's both, because you don't get results without activity. So our CEO, Robert Henderson, he laid it out in very simple terms, and I've echoed this with all the sales teams that I've worked with, is that when you think about the sales funnel, at the bottom you have deals, one step up you have opportunities, and one step up you have activities. To get anything in the bottom two quadrants, you have to have activities. But over time, the more heavily weighted the bottom two are, I may care a little bit less about just raw volume in the top category of activity. I will care more about efficiency rates. So if you're somebody that can make 10 phone calls and set 3 ops, as opposed to somebody who can make 60 phone calls and set 1 op, I don't really care. I'm probably just going to put the 3 of us in a room and say, what is 10 call 3 op person doing that 60 call 1 op person isn't doing? And then try to knowledge share that strategy among the 2 of them. So we use math to make some general forecasts of what activities we believe are going to lead to a certain conversion rate to ops, which will lead to a certain conversion rate to deals. But it has to stay agile. Like, this is a chemistry lab. And so I like to look at efficiency rates as opposed to just volume. So how many calls to a connection? How many calls to an op? Like, how many calls or emails, which type of activity, call, email, social media message, is having the highest response rate? And then that's where you can really pull levers and twist knobs to scale that efficiency across the entire team, as opposed to just hitting home every day. Hey guys, 75 calls, hit your 75 calls, hit your 75 calls. It's important to make sure that there's a balance there, because we have seen with some teams, when they have a significantly higher rate on email, then we may change the KPIs and say, let's up the email output, and then find a balance to call against it. And their KPIs may look totally different.
Yeah. And just to piggyback off of that, Jarron, if I may, I always find that focusing on the activities closest to the revenue is where we should be. So, I can make 100 calls all day, but if I'm just getting voicemails, what have I done in that time that's closest to the revenue? Maybe I need to go through my engaged contacts that I don't have a call task set for today and call them up. Because they've already expressed some sort of interest in what I've got to say. So just keeping the focus on activities, high activities is awesome, but the activities closest to your end goal is where you want to focus your time.
That, I think if there's one takeaway from this entire conversation, activities towards the end goal is where you're going to find gold. That's really what it's all about. So, there's a balance between just raw activity numbers and efficiency, but when you start to really dig into the data and look at efficiency and conversion rates, that's where you can start to think more strategically about the way in which you're supporting your team and guiding the activities that they should be doing.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, I don't know about you, Britt, but I've had a blast. This has been fun. It's cold calling. Yeah, cold calling scares me, but weirdly talking about it doesn't as much. So this has been great. For next steps from here, we love the opportunity to connect with anybody on LinkedIn. Obviously, we've talked a lot about it. It's a really casual environment for us to just get better acquainted. If for nothing else, see if we went to the same school, if we studied the same thing, whatever it may be. So don't hesitate if you're watching to connect with Britt and myself and anyone on the Jump Crew team. We're happy to talk shop. We're happy to talk not shop. Always happy to just share some ideas, some of the mistakes that we've made and how we learned from those. So you can feel free to connect with us there. You can always go to jumpcrew.com and take a look at, our model and some success stories and how it works in action and learn a little bit more about how we're set up. And that may color in some gaps there, but we're always happy to have a conversation about it. And then moving forward, we're live bi-weekly on LinkedIn doing these LinkedIn lives. So we'll look forward to the opportunity to talk about some more topics. If there's anything specific that you want Jump Crew to go live on, just let us know in the comments. Like, that's what we're here for. We'd love to hear some ideas about what's interesting to you, what you're struggling with, what's working really well. Like, we want to learn from everybody, that's following Jump Crew as well, because there's always opportunity to improve. So any thoughts before we sign off, Britt? I've certainly monopolized enough airtime.
No, I could listen to you chat all day. So it's been fun. Connect on LinkedIn, and keep things organic out there, people. You'll see great results building those relationships. So it's been fun, Jarron. I'll catch you later.
Likewise. Thanks, Britt. Bye.
See ya.